Hello and happy Tuesday evening to you all. I'm fresh off watching the Toronto Maple Leafs take a 3-2 series lead. Could this be the year that they win their first playoff series in almost 2 decades? Probably not, but the theater in that series is absolutely spectacular. For today's episode, I'm bringing back Rachel Knowns of the Hockey Writers to discuss the series. And yes, it is not a game recap episode. So again, I am pulling out all of the stops for the Penguins to hopefully win this series. I picked against them going into this. I said Rangers 7. Yes, it is possible. Yes, I still think it very well could happen. Right now, the Penguins are up 3-1. I'm bringing on Rachel not after a game recap. Usually when that happens, the Rangers win. Again, I am a very superstitious person. That is how I roll. I'm going to wear the same outfit for tomorrow night as I did for game 4 and as I did for game 3. That is me. And, the playoff period starting to come back in a little bit of form. But for today's episode, again, Rachel Knowns talking adjustments for game 5 and everything in between right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @L_Penguins. And joining me now again is Rachel Knowns of the Hockey Writers. And as I said in my intro, this time it is not a game recap episode. I am trying to pull out all the stops here and be very superstitious for the Penguins to potentially win this series on Wednesday night. Rachel, we'll just get right into it. This series, I said before this, I did not take the Penguins. I thought they were cooked going into this. They did not have their legs. All of a sudden, they win game 1, they drop game 2, and then they just activate a kill switch, basically these next 2 games, and they're playing like the 2016 and 2017 Penguins, and like they're shot out of a cannon. They chase Shesterkin both games, 10 goals in 3 periods, very Pekka Rinne-like. From 2017 for everyone that, of course, that watched that Stanley Cup final. What has been, the big deciding factor for you so far in this series between these 2 teams? Because I don't think anyone saw it going the way it has so far through 4 games.
I think the Rangers just are really having a hard time finding the consistency that they need. And when you're a playoff team, there's a lot of things that are going to need to stay consistent. So from game 1, you kind of knew that they needed to play a full game, a full 60 minutes, and obviously they didn't do that. So when you don't like the result from game 1, you definitely need to change things going into game 2. But from the first game, they just needed to keep it simple, and they just weren't doing that. So they're still passing way too much. And, they're at a point where it's just like it's too simple. Like they're not doing any of the right things. And it was hard for them to do the right things to begin with, and they've dropped so much. I mean, things as basic as the physicality. Now you compare that last game to the first game, there's no physicality from the Rangers anymore. And I don't know if it's a matter of injury or they're just scared with the officiating and how that's going to go, what kind of bounce they're going to get. But you don't need that in a playoff series. You can't, injury aside, you can't let officiating or things like that. I don't know if it's a stamina thing. A lot of people aren't really giving credit to this team. I don't think they're completely backing down, but it's also their first time that they're in a playoff series. You have a lot of guys, it's their first time in a playoff series, especially Igor Shesterkin, and he's not playing horrible, but he's not getting the help that he needs either from the defense, and they're just not doing any of the right things that they need to do. And it's not only are the Rangers not playing as well, but the Pittsburgh Penguins are just playing good. They're playing really solid. They're playing a full 60-minute effort, and the Rangers just aren't doing that.
Yeah, I definitely think, Shesterkin obviously is going to win the Vezina, should be top 4 to 5 in every person's Hart Trophy ballot. Yes, I understand I'm probably going to get a lot of Igor comments on my YouTube page after this episode, as I have been for the previous 2 days. I fully respect all of you all. Please, for the love of God, do not post the clip of him doing this to Mark Friedman and all the Penguins, mouthing off and all that. keep that in your back pocket. The Penguins win this series, then you can go all bullocks and out that. I don't need to see everyone being overconfident here, but I mainly think, Rachel, it's the team defense that is really letting him down. The Penguins forecheck is dismantling them in ways that, again, I haven't really seen the Penguins forecheck this good in probably 4 to 5 years. Adam Fox, I think, is having a little bit of a rough series, which I didn't really expect. Patrick Nemeth, I think, is the Rangers version of Jack Johnson. I don't know why he's being iced at this point. I mean, the Ryan Lindgren injury has definitely been a bit rough. Justin Braun, I don't really think is that good. Schneider, he's a rookie. You don't really know what you're going to expect with him. It's mainly, I think, just been the Rangers defense is getting bullied. And when Shesterkin is not playing God mode, which he has been most of the year when he was at 940, potentially almost 950 most nights, this is what happens when he's not Jesus Christ himself. And when the Rangers are getting outplayed and he's getting all this traffic, it's a perfect storm for the Penguins to, I shouldn't say exploit, him, but just exploit some bad team defense. And I think that also goes hand in hand with the Rangers just not having the puck enough in this series. The Penguins, they're taking the puck below the goal line and they're bleeding like 40 to 50 seconds of the clock at the time and cycling and going low to high and getting deflections, which is what they did a lot in Game 4. I think that's been one of the main differences in this series for me is that, they've been able to change up some of their offensive tactics from the regular season. And I don't think Gallant has adjusted to it, or, does he even want to adjust to it at this point?
So the tough thing with the lines and the matchups on the ice is that they've just been so uneven. I mean, you have defense who's not really pitching in defensively, and then your forwards aren't pitching in defensively. I mean, I don't think Artemi Panarin's been great with the puck defensively this entire series. Mika Zibanejad, who's usually pretty good defensively, I haven't really seen or can remember of any great play that he's made recently defensively. So, when you had guys that you could put up in the regular season against the Sid line, and all of a sudden they're just not helping whatsoever, defense or forwards, it's tough. And I don't know. This is a pretty interesting situation for Gallant to coach such a young team in the postseason. Obviously, he has a postseason experience, but Pittsburgh's a tough playoff team. I mean, they have all that experience, and I think this is definitely a challenge for Gallant. I don't want to say he was really gifted in Vegas, but he kind of was, because they weren't like all these young players. They did have some experience, but it's so hard to compare Vegas Gallant to what he's with now. So it's just tough. You mentioned Nemeth, and he's obviously having a very rough series, but the issue is that you have these replacements for him. When Ryan Lindgren went out, we have other guys that can step up, and yet we're constantly seeing Nemeth. I thought for sure last night he was going to be benched, and then to see him out there, it's frustrating already. But the Rangers have the luxury of not really having to worry about the defense. I mean, they've been pretty solid. They didn't really have injuries. We didn't miss Ryan Lindgren during the season. So, he and Adam Fox were pretty much secured, and we didn't have to worry about that. And then, with Barclay Goodrow out, it was nice to see Dryden Hunt back in the lineup. I thought he actually played really well when he was in. Of course, he's not in anymore. So when you're missing Barclay Goodrow, who was acquired for this, and you're not really replacing him with somebody who's going to bring that physicality right there, that already gives you a disadvantage. So I kind of question a lot of the things that Gallant's doing without even, the line matchups with what's actually happening during the game. So in that aspect, I think a lot of people are calling for him to be fired, and I don't see that being impossible in the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I don't probably think Gallant, he probably shouldn't. I mean, he's not going to be fired after this. I mean, they exceeded expectations. They got to the playoffs. A lot of people expected them to win this series, and they still very well may. The series is not close to over, even though the Penguins have a grand opportunity in front of them on Wednesday to close the series out in 5 games. But I do agree he's definitely not doing enough, and that's going to be the first thing we touch on in the next segment, especially with regards to matching up against the Sidney Crosby line. But before we get to that, Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NLF futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow this show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Quick note, just want to shout everyone out who, new listeners, longtime listeners. The show is number 6 overall in the United States today on Chartable, right up there with the big boys, the Spit and Chicklets, 32 Thoughts, Jeff Merrick show. I just can't thank everyone enough for supporting this podcast and, bringing it up all the way there. I know it's playoff time. Maybe some of the views will go down once the Penguins potentially get eliminated, or, just even if they win the Stanley Cup during the offseason. But, I just really wanted to shout you all out for continuing to support this podcast and always tuning in to listen to me just talk out of my ass for 30 minutes about this team. But, Rachel, the Sidney Crosby line, they have absolutely torched the Rangers. It really hasn't mattered what Gallant has thrown at them. I did see today that he's really not changing the lines, which is, I don't know if he wants to go down with his ship. I don't know what it is. Maybe he's hoping that they can win this game, which is a very distinct possibility. Hell, I think it's probably likely that they do win Game 5 and then send it back to Pittsburgh. But what matchup would you look for to do their best against Crosby? Because, Game 4, 90% of the expected goals. He has 9 points in 4 games. Jake Gensel is also over a point per game. Brian Rust is also killing them. I mean, this line is single-handedly willing the Penguins to be within 60 minutes of winning this series. If you're Gallant, what do you do to slow them down, if anything?
That's a great question. Honestly, I wouldn't even know. I couldn't even say confidently the top line would be the way to go, because, like I said, you have, Kreider, who's, he would bring the speed to things. He would bring the physicality. He's a very strong player. You have Zibanejad, who typically is good defensively, but even he's kind of dipped off. And then you have Frank Vatrano. So, I would say that's your most evenly matched line, but even still, that's scary to say. And I think that's going to have to be something to take into consideration when, moves start happening and things like that, because there's just no way that you can enter another postseason series with this team. I mean, there's just no way. So that'd be my best bet, I would say.
It seems to me like when Sullivan, just not to interrupt you, when Sullivan is I think he's matching Crosby against the Zibanejad, and he's just eating his lunch, I feel like. I mean, I'm not to pick on poor Mika. I mean, he's definitely had a rough series, but it looks like he looks helpless out there against it. And I don't think Gallant is doing anything about it. He keeps saying, I think, we outrun all 4 lines. I don't really care who I put out against the Crosby line. Well, you honestly should care, because when they're out there, they have the puck basically every time in the offensive zone. And it's just the Rangers, when that Mika line is out there, they're not really getting any offense.
Right. And, I don't know if it's an injury that Mika has that he's playing through or something like that, but I just, he's definitely one of the guys that you can look for that defensive pitch in, but he's just not providing any of that. And I don't know. It's obvious. It's just not good enough. It's good for the regular season as we've seen, but you get to a point where this just exposes a lot of weak areas that we didn't see in the regular season, and it's almost impossible to have foreseen when you're not really dealing with these things beforehand. So that's about as evenly as I can say. I mean, they don't obviously have a ton of options. I don't think that the bottom 6 is good enough to be trusted that much, obviously. Obviously, depth's going to be super important to this team, but I just don't trust the bottom 6 that much. Doesn't matter how physical they are.
What do you think of, the kids line so far in this series? In my opinion, I think they've been the Rangers' best line. I know they're going out against Jeff Carter, who, let's just face it, he's not what he once was. Yes, he has a couple of goals in this series. I'm going to look past that a little bit. He's not driving play when he's playing with Jason Zucker, when he has Brock McGinn there. And funny enough, Rachel, I think that is their second. I think it's their third line, if I'm not mistaken, outside of the Panarin, Strome, Kopp line, and the Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider line. It looked like in Game 4 they were playing with more passion, more heart, and other than how do I want to phrase this? They were playing with all of those characteristics way more than the big ticket guys like Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba. I think, that's going to have to be the way to go for the Rangers to get back in this series. But I also think, Rachel, they got to have more out of those big ticket guys. Panarin has 1 goal in 4 games. I know he has 4 points, but to me, he doesn't look like himself yet, knock on wood. Zibanejad, he has not done that much so far either, knock on wood. Same with, Ryan Strome. Andrew Kopp has a couple of goals. Kreider has gotten his, though they've neutralized him the best they can. And Frank Vatrano, he has gotten his. But, last game, he actually somehow did not score against the Penguins. For them to get back in this series, would you say that the big ticket guys really have to get going here and somehow find a way through the Penguins' defensive structure?
Yeah, I mean, people want to make that argument about lack of experience hurting the Rangers when, maybe you can make that case for someone who has a role like Igor Shesterkin. But when you see the kids show up like that and they kind of just have a short memory with their shifts, I don't know if it's kind of a weird situation where it's like at that point the veterans could have something to learn from the kids and they're just coming out, like you said, with just like more passion. They just seem a lot more determined. I don't think they're as mentally beat up as the older guys. And, I could understand that because it's like at this point in your career, you're so close to making a shot at the cup. I mean, again, they're ahead of schedule with this, how far they've gone this season, but it's like mentally that's probably tough. But at the same time, you think that if they've made it this far in their career, they should have their mental game figured out a little bit more than the younger kids. But no, I think they look really good. And it's just interesting. Obviously, they needed to show up in order for the team to do well, but you need the veteran guys to show up too. When you don't have Kreider scoring on the power play, then it's not a good sign whatsoever, especially when they've been as good as they have been. So, yeah, I mean, they need everything working for them at this point. Like you said, I don't think that it's unreasonable that the Rangers could win this game 5. So, it would take everybody pitching in for sure. We already know Igor Shesterkin's going to start again, which I think is definitely the right call. But even Jacob Trouba on defense. So, he's really the only veteran at that point. But you just need those guys to be in it. And I like what I've seen from like Lafreniere and Capo Caco. They look really pretty. They look pretty good.
Yeah, the kids, I was listening to Nick Zararis, he posted his latest episode today, and he said, honestly, they look like the only 3 players that were trying it. It looks like even when the game was out of reach at this point. Still have more to get to for this episode. For our final segment, again, we're going to get into, for the last segment, what the Rangers have to do to send this series back to the Berg for a Game 6, and then potentially back to Madison Square Garden. God help us if this series goes 7. I will not survive, to say the least. At that point, maybe Tristan Jarry is ready to go, but I'd rather just hopefully the Penguins can do it, save him until round 2. But that's coming up right after this commercial break. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, LO_Penguins. So, Rachel, I mean, this is, since I know you, this is your first do or die elimination game. I've said this on the show numerous times, and this holds true for any series. 4th game is the hardest to win. The team is back up against the wall. They're desperate. They're going to throw everything they have at you to make sure they go down with that fight. But, I can't help but wonder, Rachel, that loss, it just was so demoralizing. How are the Rangers going to show up for that game? I know the crowd is going to be there. Madison Square Garden has been very raucous in the first couple of games for numerous reasons that we don't have to get into for this show. But just how do they recover off a loss like that, where you're not really changing up anything? What do you how do you expect the team to come out on Wednesday?
I think they come out pretty well. I think that they know, it kind of stinks that they're in this position. They've 100% caused it themselves, but maybe this is the wake-up call that they needed to finally get something going. Um, I said it from the beginning of the series, they needed to stay up. They needed to be opportunistic, and the Pens aren't going to give them many chances, so they just have to kind of run with whatever they do give. So, for this game ahead, maybe the Pens come in a little lazy just because they do have that comfortable lead, and maybe they underestimate the Rangers a little bit. I mean, that's kind of been like the whole tagline of the Rangers all year long. That they just kind of weren't taken so seriously, and then they ended up second in the Metro. So I don't know. I mean, I know the Rangers definitely underestimated some teams this season, so it's very possible that the Pens could do that. If so, the Rangers need to just run with that and take as much as they can. You definitely need Frank Petrano to come out and score. You need Chris Kreider. Obviously, he took that puck last game, so I don't know what kind of shape he's necessarily
Yeah.
in. But you just need them to kind of guide things like that. And last game, when you have Lafreniere scoring first of the game and then first of the Rangers too, that's something that you want to see. So I would say they definitely need to score first. It's not going to be like the key to winning the game, but it's definitely going to help them. And they just need to pitch in front of Igor more. I mean, they can't leave him out to dry. The goals that he's facing or the goals that he's giving up, those are the hardest to stop if you're a goaltender. So I know that they worked on that kind of stuff a lot during practice today. He worked with their goaltender coach. So, just again, it's just going back to the basics and things like that. So I think that's really the best chance that they're going to have. They need to stop passing. They need to just start shooting at the net more. So in terms of
After
that,
all,
they can all be more like
Louie
Petrano.
Domingue is back there. It's not God here, We're not having God in net. Just
But it's
saying.
still crazy. It's still crazy to me because look at how far he's gone this series and look at the shots that he's faced and who's shooting. I mean, these are not just, young, inexperienced guys. There's some good players on the Rangers and they know how to shoot. They know how to place the puck. And I don't think Louis Domingue's getting enough credit. I still don't think so. And I think that I don't know if the Rangers are kind of underestimating him too. At this point, I think that's super unfair to do because look at how he's playing and look at the results. But yeah, I mean it's kind of like the roles are reversed between the two goaltenders. So it's you just need to help him out in every opportunity that you can.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird, game 4, 24 total shots, which is unheard of in a playoff game. And you have one high danger chance against an AHL fringe NHL goaltender. What are we doing here? I mean, that's just to me, that's unacceptable. You have to pepper him more. I will say credit to the Penguins for playing a very good structure in front of him. They're not letting him see a lot of high danger chances in the series. That is the key for them. If Domingue can make the saves he's supposed to make and the Penguins can keep finishing on their chances, then they will have a good chance of winning this game on Wednesday and closing out the series and not having it go back to Pittsburgh. You kind of basically answered the last question I was going to ask you, Rachel, about, what do the Rangers need to do to send this back to Pittsburgh? I think it was basically the same question of, like, how are they going to come out on Wednesday? But I mean, this should be, a very interesting final 1 to 3 games. This series has been very unpredictable so far. I am sure it has another surprise or two up its sleeve. Believe me on that. Do you have any other final thoughts on this series? Any other observations that you've seen so far going into Game 5?
I haven't seen a lot of people actually talk about Alexander Georgiev, who's obviously come in the last 2 times that Igor was yanked. And I thought he looked okay. I mean, obviously he didn't close out the rest of the game without
Gave up
letting
the
any other
squeaker.
goals in. Yeah, but I mean, that's, it's Alexander Georgiev still. But I thought he gave them a chance to at least kind of get some sort of a rebound, not necessarily tie the game up, but he put them in some sort of a position to kind of get any advantage that they could. And he definitely made some big saves. So I just thought that was interesting that Georgie comes in and he looks pretty decent, but especially when the Pens are just, I mean, you have Penn's goals up and down the lineup from defense, from, everyone. So for Georgiev to shut some of that down, that's huge.
Yeah, I know some people were surprised that they're not going to Georgiev tomorrow. I mean, that's just waving the white flag to me. I mean, if you're going to start Alexander Georgiev, and he's fine, but you're not going to start your future Vezina winner in a must-win elimination game. That is just galaxy braining it. You are deranged if you think,
especially at the Garden.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, you're quitting on your best player this year. At the end of the day, they were not going to do that. What they're going to do, they're going to try to extend this series. If they go down, if the captain goes down with the ship and they don't want to change the lines, that's their call. The Penguins, as Mike Sullivan's mantra is, they just play. And there's a chance Rickard Rakell will be back tomorrow. He said he was contacted today, but Mike Sullivan said he has not been cleared yet. I'm sure he'll be at the morning skate tomorrow. Maybe he's a game time decision. Maybe they hold him out. Who knows? But Tristan Jarry, he's continuing to progress and skate. He took more shots from Andy Chiodo today, 45 to about a 50-minute workout on the ice before practice. They're working him back. Again, I poked around a little bit, hoping for game 6 if it's necessary back in Pittsburgh. And that will be a nice time to return if there is, because you have your home crowd behind you. You don't have to go up in the Garden for a potential raucous game 7. And like I said, God forbid it gets that far. I'm going to knock on wood here. But it's been a series full of surprises, and we'll see. The Penguins will have their first chance to win a series since 2018, Wednesday night at the Garden. That was the Penguins' first Game 4 win also since 2018 against Philadelphia Flyers. They ended up winning that series in 6 games. But Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. I am, it's probably pretty likely we'll do a post-series mortem on, whoever wins this series, whether the Rangers come back and win 3 in a row, or the Penguins close this out Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday. Who knows? But yeah, for the new people that are here, tell everyone where they can follow you on social media and where they can read your work.
So I cover the Rangers at the Hockey Writers. We have a great team of writers who cover all of the teams. So we do a lot of good Rangers content there. And then on Twitter, it's just at Rachel NHL.
Yep. So go follow her content. She also does a good job of live tweeting the games, and I'm sure she will be doing that again tomorrow in a must-win game for the Rangers. So, right now, Pitt in the Metropolitan Division playoff bracket, Penguins up 3-1. Carolina, the Hurricanes, up 3-2 on the Bruins. Both teams 1 win away from playing each other in the first round. But knowing the NHL, it will probably just be Rangers Bruins or Rangers Canes or something. But, we'll see in the second round. That's still a few days away at this point. But thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back on Wednesday with a full game recap episode. If the Penguins win, yes, I will be having another beer or two live right after the game ends. I will not hesitate to do that. I've done that a couple times. And again, yes, I have to wear the same outfit I wore in game 4 and game 3. That's what we do here. That's the superstitions here. But we'll see. The Penguins have an opportunity to close this out. We'll see what this team is made of in terms of that killer instinct that we saw in 2016, 2017. Can't wait to see it. Be back with another episode Wednesday evening, and I'll talk to you all then.